Well, hello there. Fancy seeing you here, eh? It is Storytime with Uncle Scotty. I happen to be Uncle Scotty. You happen to be here for Storytime, so that is convenient. We have our own mugs. Water's delicious. Washing our hands is delicious. Thank you everyone for joining us on Patreon who has. For getting your own mugs, your own bookmarks as you need them. You can also check us out. Join if you would like. It would mean the world to me. Also meaning the world, subscribing, liking these videos. If you feel so inclined, it's always very helpful. Only takes a moment. And I want to give a shout out to another one of our supporters today. Let's see here. Donna from Los Angeles, California. Donna, thank you. You've been one of our biggest supporters from day one, from day zero, I suppose. And I appreciate you watching and contacting us by getting your own mug. So thank you, Donna. Everybody send some love to Donna, one of our most faithful watchers out there. Also, everyone give a big thank you to Time, because without Time, there could be no story time. There would just be... Can't do it. What is a story if you don't have time to tell it? A thought? Thought Time with Uncle Scotty. Not the same, is it? I know. Okay, we've been reading Mr. Popper's Penguins. Learning about Mr. Popper, learning about Captain Cook, learning about alliteration. Mr. Popper has decided to take the penguin out, Captain Cook, out for a walk, and he's dressed himself up in the tuxedo that he got married in. He's slicked back his hair, shaved his beard, put on a tuxedo, looks like a penguin, walks like a penguin. Could be a penguin, but it's actually Mr. Popper with a penguin. So, let's find out what happens. Don't forget about alliteration, remember? It's when a bunch of words start with the same letter. Popper penguin came in a package from the South Pole, right? The policeman came by. Chapter 8, Penguin's Promenade. Penguin's Promenade. Mr. Popper soon found that it was not so easy to take a penguin for a stroll. Captain Cook did not care at first for the idea of being put on a leash. However, Mr. Popper was firm. He tied one end of the clothesline to the penguin's fat throat and the other end to his own wrist. "Ork!" said Captain Cook indignantly. Still, he was a very reasonable sort of bird, and when he saw that protesting him did no good, he recovered his customary dignity, like his more proud, astute self, and decided to let Mr. Popper lead him. Mr. Popper put on his best Sunday derby, his hat, and opened the front door with Captain Cook waddling graciously beside him. "Gaw!" said the penguin, stopping at the edge of the porch to look down at the steps. Mr. Popper gave him plenty of clothesline leash. "Gook!" said Captain Cook, and raising his flippers, he leaned forward bravely and tobogganed down the steps on his stomach. Mr. Popper followed, though not in the same way. Captain Cook quickly got up on his feet again and strutted to the street ahead of Mr. Popper with many quick turns of his head and pleased comments on the new scene. Ork, ork, gook, ork, ork. Down Proudfoot Avenue came a neighbor of the Poppers, Mrs. Callahan, with her arms full of groceries. She stared in astonishment when she saw Captain Cook and Mr. Popper, looking like a larger penguin himself in his black tailcoat. "Heavens have mercy on us!" she exclaimed as the bird began to investigate the striped stockings under her house dress. "It isn't an owl and it isn't a goose." "It isn't," said Mr. Popper, tipping his Sunday derby. "It isn't. It's an Antarctic penguin, Mrs. Callahan." "Get away from me," said Mrs. Callahan to Captain Cook. "An anteater, is it?" "Not anteater," said Mr. Popper. "Antarctic. It was sent to me from the South Pole." "Take your South Pole goose away from me at once," said Mrs. Callahan. Mr. Popper pulled obediently at the clothesline while Captain Cook took a parting peck at Mrs. Callahan's striped stockings. Now, just one time out. Alliteration. Captain Cook took a parting peck at Mrs. Callahan's striped stockings. said Mrs. Callahan. "I must stop in and see Mrs. Popper at once. I would never have believed it. I will be going now." "So will I," said Mr. Popper as Captain Cook dragged him off down the street. The next stop was the drugstore at the corner of Proudfoot Avenue and Main Street. Here, Captain Cook insisted on looking over the window display, which consisted of several open packages of shiny, white, boric crystals. These he evidently took from polar snow, for he began to peck at the window vigorously. Peck, 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 peck. And here you can see Mrs. Callahan. A lot of issues here. Mrs. Callahan's got her arm full of groceries. I don't know if she had to stand 6 feet away from people when she bought those, but she got the groceries. The leash clothesline is all around her, wrapped up. She's freaking out, understandably so. What is this huge South Pole goose anteater? It's a penguin. She's dropping her groceries. It's tough. She's got all kinds of things. Also, Mr. Popper, check him out in the back. There's a sweet mustache. Doffing his cap. Doffing. We'll figure it out. Either way, Captain Cook, pecking vigorously at the drugstore window. Suddenly, a car wheeled to the nearby curb with a shriek of its brakes, and two young men sprang out, one of them bearing a camera. "This must be it," said the first young man to the other. "That's them, all right," said the second young man. The cameraman set up his tripod on the sidewalk. There's a tripod here. You can't see it. The camera's on it. By this time, a small crowd had gathered around, and two men in white coats had even come out of the drugstore to watch. Captain Cook, however, was still much too interested in the window exhibits to bother to turn around. "You're Mr. Popper of 432 Proudfoot Avenue, aren't you?" asked the second young man, pulling a notebook out of his pocket. "Yes," said Mr. Popper, realizing that his picture was about to be taken for the newspaper. The two young men had, as a matter of fact, heard about the strange bird from the policeman and had been on their way to the Popper house to get an interview when they saw Captain Cook. "Hey, Pelican, turn around and see the pretty birdie," said the photographer. "That's no pelican," said the other, who was a reporter. "Pelicans have a pouch in their bills. Now, my dad used to say something like, 'Let's praise the pelican. His beak can hold more than his belly can.' Because their beaks are really big and they can hold a lot of food there, I think. Pelicans have a pouch in their bills. I think it was a dodo, only dodos are extinct. This will make an elegant picture if I can ever get her to turn around." "It's a penguin," said Mr. Popper proudly. "Its name is Captain Cook." "Cook!" said the penguin, turning around now that they were talking about him. Spying the camera tripod, he walked over and examined it. "Probably thinks it's a three-legged stork," said the photographer. Now, a stork is a big, tall bird. I think that storks are often said to be the birds that deliver babies. I think a stork delivered Dumbo. Have to fact check that. "This bird of yours," said the reporter, "is it a he or a she? The public will want to know." And here you can see Captain Cook walking around the tripod there, checking it out. Mr. Popper hesitated. "Well, I call it Captain Cook." "That makes it a he," said the reporter, rapidly writing in his notebook. Still curious, Captain Cook started walking round and round the tripod till the clothesline, the penguin, Mr. Popper, and the tripod were all tangled up. At the advice of one of the bystanders, the tangle was finally straightened out by Mr. Popper's walking around the tripod 3 times in the opposite direction. At last, Captain Cook, standing beside Mr. Popper, consented to pose. Mr. Popper straightened his tie, and the cameraman snapped the picture. Captain Cook shut his eyes, and this is the way the picture appeared later in all the newspapers. Isn't that funny? The penguin had his eyes closed. In the big picture in the paper. "One last question," said the reporter. "Where did you get your strange pet?" "From Admiral Drake, the South Pole explorer. He sent it to me for a present." "Yeah," said the reporter. "Yeah, okay. Anyway, it's a good story." They didn't believe him. The two young men jumped into their car. Mr. Popper and Captain Cook continued their walk. with quite a crowd following and asking questions. The crowd was getting so thick that, in order to escape, Mr. Popper led Captain Cook into a barber shop. The man who kept the barber shop had, up until this time, been a very good friend of Mr. Popper's. And we will find out what happens next time on Storytime with Uncle Scotty. I have been so fortunate to be your host, Uncle Scotty. We have our own mugs. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking these videos. Thank you for checking us out on Patreon. Y'all are really making this whole thing so much fun for me and special, and I really just appreciate you. It means a lot. So, I can't wait to see you tomorrow on Storytime with Uncle Scotty. And until then, wash your hands, take care of yourselves, do all that work, all that homework, all that home play, all that play, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye.